more people that hopped on, so I will get started. My name is Alyssa Winters, and I'll be starting us off for tonight. We just want to thank all of you for joining us today for this presentation. Its intention is to educate private landowners about the many program options out there to help them make positive changes to their land and potentially get some financial assistance to help them do so. I had a lot of fun with my colleagues putting this presentation together. I think we all learned a few things in the process, at least I did, and we really hope that you all take away some valuable information and hopefully find a program that suits your goals. And on that note, we'd love to learn a little bit more about all of you joining us today and why you might be attending. So if you could find the chat icon, which should be at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you can, if you would like to, you don't have to, you can share your name and your county that you live in, and if you are a farmer or a landowner, or if you're affiliated with an agency or an organization. And while you guys are doing so, Barry, if you'd like to go on to the next slide, I'll just go over a few things before we fully get started. Just some tips. The first is this workshop is being recorded, which you should have received a message as soon as you hopped on to the meeting. But it is being recorded. We're hopefully going to have it posted in the next few weeks onto YouTube. And all participants should receive an email letting them know that it's available to rewatch and to share. Also, everyone has been automatically muted and with their video shut off. So if you see your microphone and your video icons, you'll see that they have the little red slashes across those icons. But we do want to hear your questions and your comments. So at any time during the presentation, please feel free to drop all those questions or comments into the chat box. And at the end of the presentation, we will answer all the questions at the very end. And the whole meeting should take about an hour total, with about 40 minutes of presentation and plenty of time for questions at the end. And it looks like a few people have dropped some information in the chat, and hopefully a few more people have joined on. So I think we will get started. If Barry, you would like to advance to the next slide. So who are we and why are we talking to you about funding for conservation? We are Farm Bill biologists covering select counties across Lower Michigan, as you can see here on the map. Also on the screen are three logos. The first one is the Michigan Association of Conservation Districts. We are based out of, and we do our work out of, local conservation district offices. And you might know of your local conservation district for their annual spring tree sale, or maybe another service that they provide. But we wouldn't exist without funding from the Michigan Department of Natural Resources and from the support of Hunter Dollars. So thank you to the DNR and to Hunters for your license purchases. And finally, the last logo on the screen, the Michigan Pheasant Restoration Initiative, or MPRI for short. Our role as Farm Bill biologists is to carry out the mission of the MPRI, which is essentially a statewide effort to improve pheasant habitat in order to increase pheasant populations and hunting opportunities. So we as Farm Bill biologists, we connect landowners with various conservation programs and educate them on the different options that are available, like we are doing with this presentation today. And we also connect landowners with other landowners or conservation organizations that might have similar goals to them as a landowner. And you'll notice that we don't cover every county in Michigan, but if you're outside any of these highlighted areas, we are definitely more than happy to help you out, or at least connect you with the right people in your area. And myself, I cover Sanilac and Lapeer in the purple, as well as St. Clair County. So if you are in any of those counties, I am happy to work with you and help you on your conservation journey. And this map will also be available at the very end of our presentation for you to jot down our information if you are interested in contacting us. And with that, I will pass it over to Logan to introduce himself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Logan Banning, and I service Gratiot, Clinton, and Saginaw counties. And I'm the newest of the Farm Bill biologists. I've been around for about 5 months. And yeah, if any of you guys are in my area and are looking for any technical assistance, feel free to contact me with that information below. I'll go ahead and pass it over to Laura.
Hi, I'm Laura. I work out of the Lenawee County Conservation District, and I also cover Hillsdale and Monroe counties. And I've been in the position about 2 years now. And now I will pass it over to Barry Weldon. He is going to be our guide for the content going forward in this presentation. So go ahead and take it away, Barry.
All right, thank you, Laura. I'm Barry Weldon, and I am the Farm Bill biologist in Huron and Tuscola counties. I'm primarily housed in Tuscola. That's my home office in Caro. And before we move from this screen, we would probably be remiss if we don't mention Ms. Kayla Bradford. She was unable to join us this evening. She services Calhoun and Branch counties in the southern part of the state. So with that, let me apologize in advance as well. My son gave me a roaring head cold over the weekend. Good timing by my 16-year-old. So I apologize for being a little on the stuffy side as we move through these slides. So I'm going to stop my video and then we will move forward. So again, partners who make this possible for us, U.S. Department of Agriculture and Farm Service Agency are two partners who make this possible. Michigan Association of Conservation Districts, Michigan Department of DNR, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and NRCS, Natural Resources Conservation Service. Those are the primary agencies that house the programs in which we work. As Alyssa said, we are funded by Hunter dollars through the Michigan Department of Natural Resources. We're employed by the conservation districts, the local unit, and we work across not only state programs, but also the federal level programs with USDA Farm Service Agency, NRCS, and Fish and Wildlife Service. I would like to give a special thank you to one of our participants. This is a woman that I work with on a daily basis, Ms. Carol Shad. She's in your participant list. Carol's a district conservationist in Tuscola. She has 20 years of incredible experience and honors working with NRCS, and she's a fabulous mentor to me and my other colleagues on this presentation. And she's joined us to assist with any Q&A here at the end. So thank you, Carol, for joining us. We had hoped to get MDNR here, but they were unable to make it, and a farm service representative, but they additionally were unable to make the presentation. So our outline for tonight is the screen in front of you. We're going to be going through each one of these programs as opportunities for landowners to enroll their lands in programs that have benefit across the ecosystem. We'll be looking at the Conservation Reserve Program, the State Acres for Wildlife Enhancement, CRP Grasslands, Hunting Access Program. It's not an exhaustive list, but we are going to give brief insight into these. There are lots of conservation options. There are lots of resources and lots of pools of money to tap into. So we're about habitat, we're biologists. And so we look at this from a biological perspective. And when we discuss habitat with landowners, habitat are what organisms need in order to survive and reproduce for the next generation. They need food, they need water, they need shelter, and they need space. And when you have those, they will align for successful reproduction and continuity of species. Lack of habitat hurts species. Two species of interest that are aquatic based, that the state of Michigan is actively, and some of our federal partners and tribal partners are actively attempting to reintroduce and rehabilitate in the state of Michigan, are Arctic grayling in northern Michigan, cool and cold water streams. Arctic grayling were lost from the state of Michigan essentially forever unless helped by human intervention, because primarily the deforestation and logging of our northern hardwoods, which crushed their habitat in inland rivers across northern Michigan. Sturgeon face the same struggles. Now, sturgeon are still around in very low numbers around Michigan, but the state of Michigan, tribal and federal partners are trying to rehabilitate those populations to what they once were. They're a fraction of what they once were. And again, outside of human kill, the major component to sturgeon population decreasing was habitat destruction. Again, a lot of that was due to logging and deforestation of our northern hardwood forests. And so the map that you see in front of you is the way Michigan used to look. It's not how Michigan currently looks. Pre-1900, we had an extremely diverse ecosystem. We had lots of different kinds of hardwood forests, softwood forests. We had swamps, we had wet prairies, et cetera, et cetera. And they virtually all got logged off if they were forests, but they were also drained for agricultural production in terms of wetlands. It's not the full story, though, in terms of Michigan's ecosystems in antiquity, because we also had a pretty significant level for a northern state of savanna and grassland. That's the pale color in the southern Michigan, southern lower peninsula counties, roughly stretching from Detroit down to the southwest corner of the state, a few pockets of it up north. But we also had that savanna and grassland, which often people don't equate with the state of Michigan. And you can see that we just had tremendous amounts of habitat, and that created tremendous amounts of biodiversity across the state of Michigan for us. So our forests, when we're talking habitat, these are examples of species that can be found in those habitats. We also have representative species for grasslands. We have representative species for aquatic systems as well. Different species have different habitat needs, and we are looking to increase the habitat for them. This is not an exhaustive screen of all the different types of organisms that will be utilizing these various habitats. For example, in the middle section, pheasants love their grasslands with plenty of flowers, open spaces for movement, food, nesting, cover, winter cover. They are utilizers of that grassland habitat. Deer and turkeys are generalists. They will utilize our forest plots. They will utilize fields, farmland. They're primarily found moving through forests. And then in our aquatic systems, for example, smallmouth bass there need their cool, clear water with some gravel and weedy structures for reproduction. So the Conservation Reserve Program will be the first program we start with. This is a program that's housed within Farm Service Agency. CRP has been around for a while. CRP has been around since 1985. And through the life of it, as we move into roughly its fourth decade here, no program in history has done more for landscape level conservation of soil and water and wildlife habitat creation than CRP. The amount of money poured into it and the amount of acreage has just made it the champ of conservation of soil and water resources across this country. It's measurably improved water quality and wildlife habitats and populations, and it's measurably reduced soil erosion, which has been a significant influence since we turned so much of our landscape into agricultural production. CRP has, bottom line, been very successful in achieving its goals. So as an overview of CRP, in a nutshell, agricultural land is taken out of crop production and replaced with long-lived grasses, wildflowers, trees, or shrubs. Our goals are fairly simple: improve water quality, reduce soil erosion, and enhance wildlife habitat. Contracts for CRP are typically 10 to 15 years in length, and the agencies that work within CRP are Natural Resources Conservation Service and the USDA Farm Service Agency. Again, Farm Service Agency is the administrator of this program. So with CRP, we have two types of CRP. We have general CRP and continuous, and we've got a little grid for you here to separate the differences between them. For general CRP, the selection process is competitive. There is a nationwide ranking, whereas in continuous CRP, it is not competitive. It does mean you're automatically enrolled if you're found eligible, but there are some additional criteria for that can be locally influenced. And so in order to understand what those specific criteria are, your local office, your local Farm Service Agency office will be able to help you with that. Signups, general. We originally, when we went through this a little over a week or a little under a week ago, we had the application time frame for general as a blank screen, but we just got fresh off the presses the general CRP sign up, and the window for that sign up is February 27th, beginning next week, and it runs until April 7th. That's when the window closes for the general CRP sign up. For continuous, the difference is that is ongoing. It is continuous throughout the year. It is preferred with continuous to have a spring sign up so that everything can get set so that a contract can begin at the start of the federal fiscal year. Start of the federal fiscal year is October 1. So whereas continuous does happen from January 1st to December 31st, to meet the nuances of the federal fiscal year, the preference is to get continuous CRP signups in the spring. So financial incentives with these programs, we've boiled them down to two here that are broad-based. You can receive up to 50% cost share to establish the required conservation practices across these programs. And then there's an annual rental payment per acre that's determined by 3 predominant soil types. And those soil types are going to vary across counties and which ones are predominant. And there's going to be different rental rates for those soil types. But additionally, excuse me, one of the things that CRP provides, not only through NRCS, but in particular, the 4 of us as Farm Bill biologists, is that we provide valuable technical assistance. We assist landowners when they get interested in this. FSA will set them up, and then they will come to us, and we will work with them as they establish the CRP practices, and they answer that contract. They do annual maintenance on it. They perform mid-contract activities, and then ultimately status reviews are done at the end of the contract. And so that's one of the primary goals of the 4 of Farm Bill biologists here on this evening's presentation, is that we provide technical assistance across these programs. And so with that, talking eligibility, land must have 4 years of cropping history from 2012 to 2017. Those might be on initial look odd dates. And the reason for that is because the Farm Bill in its current iteration is up for renewal. It hopefully and in all likelihood will be renewed sometime later this year. And that will start a new 5-year Farm Bill cycle beginning in later 2023. And since that is why those dates are there from 2012 to 2017. As a new Farm Bill is enacted, those dates will change, but because currently any current general CRP or continuous CRP will be operating under the old Farm Bill, those are our current dates. Another eligibility is that the land must be physically and legally capable of being planted. Your neighbor probably isn't going to appreciate if you put their private property into CRP, so it needs to be physically and legally capable of being planted. And as a landowner, you must have owned the land for 1+ year. And so one thing to be mindful of with all this eligibility is that CRP is a working lands program and generally provides the most financial benefits to participants. If your land, excuse me, does not meet CRP eligibility, USDA and other partners do have other conservation opportunities available. So examples of some planting options within CRPs, you can introduce cool season grasses and legumes, and they will have a specific conservation plan that will be attached to them. You can also introduce native warm season grasses and wildflowers, and there will be a specific conservation plan attached to them as well. And then there can be CRPs that plant trees and shrubs, and there are specific conservation plans that will be attached to those practices as well. And again, CRP through your Farm Bill biologist provides a lot of technical assistance to help you with establishment, maintenance, management activity, and then running the course of the contract. That's one of my primary duties in the summer, as is my 3 colleagues here. We go out and we walk lands with landowners, and we sit down in their kitchens or their breakfast nooks, and we talk about how to better enhance their lands and how to work through maintenance and management activities on their lands to continue the wildlife benefits through the life of that contract. One other thing of note with CRPs is that if you have 20 acres, there are some practices that will be whole field practices, or you can enroll them in whole field practices. There are also partial field practices, and the photograph is a good example of that, where there's row crop production on the right, and then a practice, probably a prairie strip or a filter strip to the right, which that little strip of green over there is probably a water body, whether it's a county drain or a little creek running through there. You can have partial field practices, which doesn't incorporate the entire field. So you have options across your plantings and your programs on whether you want to do whole fields or partial fields. And your Farm Bill biologists and your NRCS technical assistants encounter those all the time. So transitioning from CRP, another program that is across the state is State Acres for Wildlife Enhancement, SAFE. And the full authorization of the current iteration or the future iteration of SAFE is right around the corner, but it hasn't been fully approved yet. And so we don't have a nitty-gritty details for you, but much of it is going to remain unchanged. It's an initiative under Continuous CRP, Michigan Pheasant, and Monarch Recovery. Sign up is at any point in time in the year. land requirements. The map on your right will direct you to the counties in which SAFE is a program that can be accessed. The counties in gray. That's part of the reason for why the Farm Bill biologists are in the counties they are located, because those counties can tap the state acres for wildlife and enhancement. There are acreage requirements that vary across the practices with this program. And then your planting requirement is 4 species of native grasses and 10 species of native wildflowers. And we have the wildflowers in here and the grasses in great part to coexist with the pheasant monarch recovery, because the flowers are a great draw to insects. Insects are considered wildlife, and the insects will then provide a base food source for pheasant adults, pheasant chicks, various birds across the spectrum, and that's why the planting requirements are so heavy with native wildflowers. Another program that can be accessed is Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program. How does it different from just CRP, Conservation Reserve Program? There are enhanced financial incentives for participants, and it targets very specific regions and very specific practices. The goals are to reduce sediment and nutrients entering targeted waterways and to improve water quality. This one is a lot like SAFE. The final bells and whistles on this have not been finalized at the state level yet, and so we're waiting for a little bit of guidance on this. But again, we're advancing this as a program to talk about this evening because it's not going to be substantially changed to the best of our knowledge. So Michigan CREP project area, your eligibilities are going to be those 3 watersheds. The largest watershed in the map to your right is the Saginaw Bay watershed. All waters in that blue across those counties drain into Saginaw Bay. The other blue in the southeastern part of the county is the River Raisin and Western Lake Erie Basin watershed. And so waters down there drain into Western Lake Erie Basin, and the little bit of green over there straddling Ottawa and Allegan County is the Lake Macatawa watershed. Lake Macatawa is the drowned river mouth of the Macatawa River that goes through Holland, Michigan. All 3 of those areas were selected because they have very heavily influenced waterways with agricultural runoff, sedimentation runoff from erosion, and nutrient runoff from rains hitting fields of production. In order to get eligibility for the Michigan CREP program, you need a cropping history, and you have to have select practices. You must meet erodibility criteria that's settled by your Farm Service Agency, and you need to be within 1,000 feet of an eligible water body. In terms of cropping history, rolling back just a smidge here, it's the same as CRP. You need 4 years of cropping history. So CREP financial incentives, we talked about enhanced financial incentives. You can get up to 100% cost share for the practice installation. You can get up to 140% of soil rental rate based on your soil type. There's some signing incentive payments for new enrollment. There's cost share for project maintenance, and there's additional bonus payments for certain situations, including location or climate smart cover. And those items, as biologists, the Farm Bill biologists don't work heavily in the financial side of this. That'll be handled more by your federal representatives. So our eligible CREP practices are the permanent introduction of grasses and legumes, the introduction of permanent native grasses, field windbreaks, filter strips, riparian buffers, wetland restorations, and sediment control structures. Filter strips and riparian buffers are very similar. They're basically vegetation to stop nutrient runoff and sediment erosion. Field windbreaks blocks wind erosion off of production fields, and sediment control structures could be check dams or water and sediment control basins, which either stop water velocity from crossing vulnerable, highly erodible fields, or the sediment control or the water and sediment control basins will house water that releases it more slowly into the surrounding water features, and it'll trap nutrients in that control basin. So moving into CRP grasslands, in a nutshell, CRP grasslands is for existing grasslands. It's a working lands program. Grazing and haying are allowed. Minimal limitations for wildlife benefit must be included in this. The goal: protect grasslands from conversion to provide both economic and environmental wildlife benefit. Grasslands are an ecosystem type around the world that is taking a pretty significant beating. The grasslands are much easier to transition into agricultural production. They're being lost at a significant rate around the world. And so CRP grasslands here in the United States, and specifically in Michigan, for us in this presentation, are there to hopefully stave off all of our grasslands going into agricultural production of some type. Eligibility: the producer must have owned the land for 1 year. Land must currently be planted to grass cover and have less than 5% tree canopy. Incentives in this program: there's an annual rental payment based on pasture land rental rate, and up to 50% cost share for some additional practices. For example, if you put fencing in, there is some cost share for that. One point to note here is that there is no cropping history needed for eligibility with grasslands. And so that is a difference from the other programs we've talked about that had cropping histories as an eligibility requirement for the program. CRP grasslands, you don't need a cropping history to acquire eligibility. Contract length for these is the 10 to 15 year time frame, much like a lot of the CRP contracts. So now we'll transition into Environmental Quality Incentives Program. This is an NRCS program that federal group, federal organization oversees. In a nutshell, it's a broad program that provides cost share for a wide variety of conservation practices. The goal is to address resource concerns to improve our soil health, our water quality, suitable wildlife habitat, boost crop yields potentially, and more. Contract length here is different. They typically are 5 to 10 years, but they can be smaller than that. And the agency, again, that administers this is the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service. Some additional information: to acquire eligibility as a producer, your adjusted gross income needs to be less than $900,000 per year. Your land cannot have wetland or highly erodible land violations, and there must be a demonstrated resource concern on your land to acquire eligibility. Application selection process: you can apply at any time of the year. This is competitive. You may not be selected for funding, but unfunded applications will roll over to the next funding cycle to see how they stack up against the next batch, and you may get funded at that point. But it is competitive, and it is not an automatic funding. As a producer, as well. The adjusted gross income of less than 900,000, that could potentially be an intimidating number to folks. But as a producer, if you want to get into EQIP, it can be as small as gardening or beekeeping, as small ag. That can qualify. It is designed for larger parcels, but if you have a smaller parcel and this is something that interests you, it is still worth looking at because it does have some ability to assist people with things as little as or as small versus hundreds of acres of row crop production, limited gardening or beekeeping. Payment structure: payments are made after project completion, and they will approximately pay up to 75% cost share. In some cases, it will pay more, but approximately 75 is the ballpark where we are often in. This process does take some time, so that is something to be noted. NRCS has a lot of processes that they go through in order to review EQIP applications. So one EQIP program you can get into is EQIP for pollinators. We can see lots of flowers there, the purple cone flower and the yellow coreopsis flowers. This is an example of how the program can directly benefit wildlife. It provides habitat for a wide variety of insects. It helps pollinate fields in the local environment, orchards, other farms located nearby. The species we talked about earlier, pheasants, turkeys, and deer, they will all move through this landscape, this environment, and utilize this habitat to their own specialized needs for food, for shelter, for nesting cover. And this photo is specifically taken from one of our Farm Bill biologists counties. This is a field, an EQIP pollinator field, and this field has seen a significant increase in the pheasant population because the pheasants get in there, and this is kind of pheasant heaven right here. They can move through this for cover. They can build sheltered nests in here. They can raise their young in here. They can eat insects off of all the flowers here, and insects are a significant primary portion of a pheasant's food intake. This can be done on a small scale basis as well. There are different payment rates for those who may get EQIP for pollinators in thousands of square feet versus acreage based. And so funding for this is available as long as it's 1,000 square feet or more. EQIP can be designed, or EQIP programs can be run for private forest land. In order to do that, you first need to apply for a forest management plan. You will be given a list of specific foresters in the area and across the state with whom you can work with. The licensed forester has to write the plan, and an EQIP payment rate will often cover most or all of this cost. We can't recommend specific foresters, but again, you'll be given a list of foresters who can assist you from around the state and local to your area. So once a forest management plan is written, then you apply to get cost share practices that are recommended by the forester in the plan. Those can vary from forest stand improvement to tree shrub establishment to brush management to stream habitat improvement, amongst others. In this program, you are not required to harvest timber, and that is something to note because we'll be getting to a program in a little bit where harvest of your timber resources is required. So if this forest or woodlot here was up for private forest land, EQIP, we can see the problem. There's a thick understory that's honeysuckle. It's an invasive. It could just easily have been buckthorn or autumn olive, but it's invasive. It's choking out the understory. It's not allowing regrowth of any seedlings from the mature parent trees around it. That's a challenge for humans to walk through. It's a challenge for wildlife to walk through. And so this is just a pretty tough woodland for wildlife to utilize as food, cover, movement, etc. So if we were going to attack this forest land and get it into EQIP, step one, again, we would apply for forest management plan. We'd have to establish records with Farm Service Agency where they would establish a farm tract number for the property. They would review that the AGI is less than 900,000. There is a requirement to do a 902 business plan, but that is not real thorough. It is not like starting up a small business in small town America, Main Street, where you need projected cost estimates, expense expectations, revenue streams, depreciation tables. That is not expected. It's not as a super in-depth business plan, but one needs to be done. Work with NRCS to apply and discuss the overall goals. And then if your application is selected, you can begin fulfilling the contract requirements. You hire a private forester from the approved list. Forester visits the property, writes the FMP. You submit the FMP to NRCS for certification. You received your cost share payment once the work is completed. And then you have step 3, where you again apply to the cost share of brush management and thinning, which would be recommended in a forest management plan for this tract of forest. And if your application is selected, you do the work yourself or hire a contractor, and then you receive your cost share payment once the work is completed to improve your forest land and have a much better forest ecosystem for wildlife benefit, from mammals to ground-based upland birds, to tree-based birds, to small rodents, et cetera, on the landscape. So the program where you are required to have timbering is the Qualified Forest Program. And this is a program through MDARD, the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development. In a nutshell, it's a reduction in property taxes, which is the same as reduction. It's the same reduction as qualified agricultural for productive forests. The goal of this program through MDARD is to incentivize forest management and timber harvest on private land. Contract length, it's permanent. It becomes a part of the property deed. Your agency, as noted, is MDARD. An eligible parcel for qualified forest program is 20 to 40 acre block where 80% of the forest is productive forest, or greater than 40 acres where 50% of the forest is productive forest. You do need a forest management plan that is required, and you are required to follow it. That's a program, again, through MDARD, and it incentivizes forest management and timber harvest on chunks of forest on private land.
Hey, Barry.
So now we'll transition to the Partners
Barry.
for Fish and Wildlife Program, PFW, which is run through U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And in our nutshell, it's a partnership. There are no payments here, and there are no agricultural requirements. Practice types: wetlands, grasslands, streams. Contract length is typically 10 plus years. Your agency is the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And again, it is truly about partnering with this agency to help you reach restoration or habitat goals on your landscape. It's especially of note that there are no agricultural requirements for this. So your eligibility, agriculture, non-ag land are eligible. The application time frame is continual. The selection process must align with agency priorities. The map on the right shows coverage area for Fish and Wildlife staff who can help determine whether your project fits with their priorities. There are 4 regions that are covered here in the Lower Peninsula of the state of Michigan. In Michigan, the priority is wetlands, and it's specifically targeting areas that were previously drained for agriculture or other human use that the landowner may want to bring out of some level of production or get them back into a wetland environment. Cost share is variable. Wetland, Fish and Wildlife Service usually will pay 90% of the restoration costs. Grassland, Fish and Wildlife Service will provide seed and does the planting. Landowner will provide in-kind labor. And then the landowner is responsible over the project life for that project maintenance. And that's something that potentially interests you. We put you in contact with the local fish and wildlife biologists in those 4 areas. So as we begin to wrap up here, we've got a couple more slides and one last program here, the Hunting Access Program. This is run by your Michigan Department of Natural Resources. It's a state of Michigan program. And in a nutshell, it pays landowners to allow public access to their private land for hunting from September until May. The lease agreement is 1 year. The eligibility selection process, the map on your left shows you the eligible counties. The general guideline is 40 acres or more, but there is some work potentially going on about utilizing properties as small as 20 acres. You can apply anytime. It's a case-by-case selection. District staff, including us as Farm Bill biologists and DNR, will determine eligibility of the properties. And the agency in charge of this, again, Michigan DNR, with the local assistance provided by Michigan conservation districts, especially your Farm Bill biologists. So why would somebody want to open up their private land for public hunting? Well, the state of Michigan has some incentives here. The payment structure is that you receive payment for up to $20 an acre and potentially a $5 bonus if that land is enrolled in a Farm Bill program. And so those programs at the beginning of the presentation, CREP, SAFE, CRP, those will enhance the payment and potentially up to $5 more. It's based on total acreage, habitat type, which includes forest, grasslands, mixed spaces. Those types will pay more than just cropland, and what your specific hunting options are. Some additional benefits: you have full liability protection under Public Act 451 of 1994. That's the State of Michigan Natural Resources Act. It will limit potentially localized crop damage, particularly from our lovely white-tailed deer population that loves farmers' fields. The landowner decides hunt options, so you control the hunt options you select. You can limit the number of hunters allowed at a time. It isn't, that a whole bunch of people will come. If you say 2 hunters are allowed at a time, 2 hunters are allowed at a time. Funding may be available for habitat improvements, and increasing access to hunting lands just supports our Michigan hunting heritage that has a long-standing tradition in this state across grandfathers to sons and grandsons. And we know the tradition of Michigan's hunting heritage and the stories of it. And so these are all the benefits that run into HAP incentives that the state of Michigan will provide you. So with that, of important note, which is why we've got a little warning warning emblem here. With any of these programs, make sure you don't spend money or do any work until after the contract start date. That's important because if the contract start date is October 1, you do work in August, it can be a real challenge to get any cost share for that, or it's nullified because you started before the contract was implemented. So don't start work until the contract start date. Always follow the conservation plan and guidance from the contracting agency. Your Farm Bill biologists are here to help you with that. As I noted way back at the beginning of this presentation, we're here to help you with establishment. We're here to help you with maintenance on the property, large scale mid-contract management, and then looking at the property as it nears the end of the contract life. And so don't spend money until that contract start date and follow the plan. Doing those two things will save you from potential pitfalls later on in working with these various agencies. So this is our last slide. Again, our names and our coverage areas are up there. I'm Barry. I service Huron and Tuscola County. The others introduce themselves. Kayla's not with us. She serves Calhoun and Branch County. We thank you for your participation. We thank you for bearing with my head cold here. In time, turn it over to my colleagues and participating staff to discuss any of the questions that are in chat or are brought up by the participants in this presentation. So thank you for your time, and my colleagues will take it from here.
Thank you, Barry. That was awesome. Lots of great information for everybody. I don't currently see anything in the chat, but I did just drop a link in the chat for everybody. As Barry mentioned, please contact any of us, especially if you're in one of our counties. Again, if you're outside of that, we're happy to help you or connect you with the correct person in your area. Or you can follow this link. This will connect you to your service center in your county, your USDA service center. So that is also, we'll get you to the right place as well. Again, I don't see any questions in the chat, but if anyone has any questions at this time, you can either drop them in the chat now, or you can come off mute if you would prefer to ask your question out loud. I'll give a couple seconds.
I have a question for you.
All right, sounds good.
I had CRP land that was a contract that was canceled probably in 2017 or something in Lenawee County, where apparently a lot of CRP land was canceled. And I didn't know if that is still the case, that or is it worth exploring about becoming obtaining a contract again?
I can answer this, or if Laura, you want to take it away since it's your coverage area.
Sure, yeah, I can take a crack at that. Yeah, you're referring to the audit that happened in Lenawee County in 2017, which was very unfortunate for a lot of landowners, and I'm sorry that that was affecting you. If the land does not have the cropping history that was outlined for in this presentation, 2012 to 2017, 4 out of 6 of those years, then it would not be eligible for CRP, with the exception of CRP grasslands. That's the one that doesn't require cropping history. So the rental rate on that is lower. Last year, CRP grasslands, qualifying if it's existing grass cover and has less than 5% tree canopy, the rental rate was $28 an acre. So you know, that math gets a bit harder for people to justify on a smaller acreage to bother with applying and starting a contract. But if for a larger acreage, it could be worth it. You know, for pastures and hay fields, that's they target larger acreages with those. So the one option you might have if it doesn't have cropping history would be CRP grasslands. Anyone else want to add to that? Okay, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. A follow-up question to that is there one of the programs that's particularly suited for trying to create an oak openings or an oak savanna?
That's a good one. I know there is a practice for oak savannas in CRP, but I've never worked with it, and I think it applies to land that has historically been an oak savanna. If that's correct.
Yeah, the rare and declining habitat.
Mhm.
Yeah, and if that land doesn't have the cropping history for CRP, then I'm thinking equip could be a potential option because there's tree planting practices, so it would just have to be kind of planned as the right tree density for savanna type. I don't know if you have more thoughts on that, Alyssa, or if Carol has seen that being used in that way before, equip for savanna restoration.
I haven't seen it, but it is definitely possible. And you are correct with the rare and declining habitats option for CRP, the oak savanna. It does have to be in an area that had contained historic savanna. And then there are some specific requirements as far as numbers of grass and forage species, and then how the trees would be implemented or integrated into that.
And
Yeah,
that
that's a
was
great
under
question.
what program?
It's a practice under CRP. What Carol and Laura were discussing is a practice under CRP, but as mentioned, there are specific requirements for to qualify for that practice. But I love oak savannas; they're a great natural community. So if you either have one or if you have something in mind in your area that could potentially use some restoration, if you're in Laura's coverage area, just get in contact with her, whether it's through CRP or equip, or even just giving you recommendations on what you could do maybe on your own. She can certainly help you out.
Yeah, let's talk, Bob.
Yes, good.
Thank you
Thanks.
for your
Plan on
question.
it.
Is there anybody else? All righty. Well, hearing none, I think we will go ahead and end the meeting. If you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to any of us. But we will leave it at that. It is 7 o'clock on the dot. So thank you again so much for joining us tonight. We hope you learned a few things, and we hope to hear from all of you in the future. Thank you again. Have a great night.